Okay, so are we ready to dive into this pile of economics history?
Let's do it. It's going to be quite a ride going from like bartering to modern economies.
Right, you've given us textbook stuff, pictures, even like discussion questions. It's like you want to figure out not just, what early economics was, but like the why and how it all got started,
Exactly.
which I love.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It really is. It's almost like
It's like a puzzle, isn't it?
it is. It's like piecing together a puzzle.
Yeah.
To see how humans went from basic survival needs to like the Silk Road and
Empires.
yeah, exactly. Empires in complex trade.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning.
Okay.
Paleolithic era. What do we know about the economy back then?
Well, I mean, you've got to think
It's all about survival, right?
survival, yeah.
Yeah.
Food, water, shelter,
The basic.
the very basics, and of course the tools to get those things.
Tools were a big deal back then.
Huge. Even though they were really basic stone tools. We're talking
Yeah.
like very rudimentary stuff. But even then,
If you had a good tool, you had it made.
exactly. Especially if you could get your hands on like good quality obsidian or flint.
Oh, that's right. We have that in the sources.
That's where things get interesting because even back then, with something as basic as flint, you see the early seeds of trade.
Really? I mean, it makes sense if you think about it. Like,
Hmm.
okay, imagine you've got a group of, I don't know, early humans, right?
Yeah.
And they've got this amazing flint. It's sharper, it lasts longer.
It's like the iPhone at the Paleolithic.
Right. But maybe they need more animal hides for clothing or,
Exactly.
right?
And another group, they're swimming in animal hides, but their flint is,
Garbage.
yeah. Suddenly, it's not just about survival. It's about, what do I have that you might want? That's scarcity at its finest.
And that's economics, right?
It is. You've got something I need. I've got something you want.
Let's make a deal.
There you go. It's fascinating. Bartering, even back then, was the earliest form of the complex systems we have today.
Kind of mind-blowing.
It is.
But then, all right, so then we have this huge shift.
Yeah.
We get to the Neolithic Revolution.
Right.
Agriculture comes into the picture.
This changes everything.
Everything. It's not just about surviving anymore. Humans are settling down, they're farming, and that leads to, well, it leads to leftovers, like extra stuff.
Fin plus.
Yes,
Mm.
surplus, which seems like a simple concept, but
It's huge.
it changes the game completely. Because now,
Now you have options.
yeah.
Think about it. Not everyone has to be out there hunting and gathering just to stay alive.
Right.
You can have people who focus on like specific skills.
This is where we see like pottery really take off, right? And weaving and tool making becomes even more specialized.
Exactly. Specialization. And that's where it gets really interesting, I think, because did that lead to like social hierarchies?
Oh, that's a good question.
Did some skills start to be seen as more valuable than others? We don't really know,
No.
but it's something to think about.
That's a good point. Because if you're the only one who knows how to like make
A really good pot.
a really good pot,
You've got some bartering power.
you're in demand.
Exactly.
And not only that, but we're also talking about the impact on the environment. Because now, instead of just using what they could find, humans are like shaping the land. They're cultivating crops.
Domestication.
Yeah. It's a huge change from hunter-gatherer to farmer.
And it's all because of that surplus.
Crazy. Okay, so our sources mention this place, Sadahuk.
Çatalhöyük. It's a great example of all of this happening in action.
This was like a real place.
Oh, yeah. Agriculture's booming, population explodes. Next thing you know, you've got this bustling hub of activity with people trading all these specialized goods and services. It's incredible.
It's like picturing like the first shopping mall. Like what was a day in the life like back then?
Right. Were they comparing pottery techniques over a cup of, well, whatever they drank?
Maybe arguing over the price of obsidian tools.
Who knows?
So fascinating.
It really is. And here's the thing.
There's more.
While all this is happening locally, trade starts expanding beyond just their local settlements.
It does. Like how far are we talking?
Pretty far. Get this. There's evidence of trade between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley as early as 3000 BCE.
Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. That's a long way.
It is. Over 2,500 miles.
2,500 miles? Are you serious?
At least. Think about the logistics back then. No cars, no trains.
No airplane.
It's remarkable. And it really highlights that even at these very, very early stages, trade wasn't just about necessities.
What do you mean?
I mean, the stuff being traded between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. Luxury items, textiles, precious stones, spices, things people wanted, not things they needed to survive.
So even back then, people wanted the finer things in life.
Apparently. It makes you wonder what drove those early traders to make those
I
journeys.
know, right? 2,500 miles, that's wild.
Was it purely economics, or was there also that sense of adventure, a thirst to connect with different cultures? We'll probably never know for sure.
It's like that desire for something exotic, something you couldn't get just anywhere. It's like hardwired into us, isn't it?
It seems to be, and it led to some incredible trade routes developing. We've all heard of the Silk Road, right?
Oh, yeah.
But imagine it not as just one road, but this massive network crisscrossing thousands of miles connecting the world.
Like arteries.
Exactly. Arteries of trade and culture. And it wasn't just silk, right?
What else was there?
Oh, you name it. Spices from the East Indies, glassware all the way from Rome, silver from the mountains of Central Asia,
Yeah.
all of it flowing across continents.
It's like a giant global flea market.
It really is. With goods changing hands, who knows how many times along the way.
I love that. Okay, but we're talking about all this overland trade, but the seas were important too, weren't they?
Absolutely. While the Silk Road was, the poster child for land-based trade, the seas were just as busy. And when you think maritime trade, you've got to think,
Vikings.
not quite Vikings, think Phoenicians.
Oh, right. They were around way before the Vikings, weren't they?
Way before. They were the masters of the sea back then, no question.
Yeah. They built amazing ships.
The best. And they had these trading posts all over the Mediterranean. Like, they practically invented the idea of a global network.
On water. And they even had their own alphabet, which, by the way, did you know their alphabet influenced the Greeks and Romans?
It did. It's true.
Wild, right?
It just shows that trade wasn't just about the goods themselves, right? It was also how ideas spread. Just imagine those Phoenician traders sailing from port to port, sharing stories and knowledge from far-off lands.
It's like the original internet. But getting back to, well, economics.
Right.
Bartering is cool and all, but can you imagine trying to trade like a herd of goats for, I don't know, a shipload of silk?
It'd be a nightmare, logistically speaking, which is where the development of actual money comes in.
Exactly. But how do you even go from like bartering to money? I mean, where do coins even come from?
It's a fascinating evolution. Basically, as those trade networks expanded, bartering just wasn't cutting it anymore.
Yeah.
Our sources say livestock, especially cattle, became like an early form of currency.
Oh, right. Like, I'll trade you 2 cows for that wagon wheel or whatever.
Exactly. It makes sense if you think about it. Back then, animals were super valuable. They were food, they were labor, they were even a status symbol.
Right. Like, forget cars. Back then, it was all about how many cows you had.
Exactly. Though cows weren't the only type of, shall we say, unusual currency.
Wait, there were more? What else was there?
Ever heard of cowrie shells?
Cowrie shells, like from the ocean?
The very same. These little shells were used as currency for centuries. Can you believe it?
No way. Why shells?
Well, for one, they were durable, relatively scarce, and easy to transport, unlike a herd of cattle.
That's true. And way less messy. But like, why not just use pebbles or something? Why shells?
Well, they also had this inherent beauty, a certain aesthetic appeal.
So you're saying they were like the pretty version of a pebble?
You could say that, but it's a great example of how even early societies were already thinking about what makes for good money. It had to be something practical, something relatively rare, and yes, maybe even a little bit aesthetically pleasing.
It's just, I don't know, funny to picture like someone paying their taxes in shells, you know? But I guess it's not that different from how we use credit cards today, right?
It's all symbolic, isn't it? Whether it's a shell, a coin, or a piece of plastic, it all represents something else.
True, true. But okay, let's talk coins, like the real deal metal coins. How did that even happen?
Well, as you can imagine, eventually those early forms of currency, they couldn't keep up with the growing complexity of trade.
Right, like good luck carrying around enough cows to buy a house.
Exactly. So metal coins, they were a real game changer. Durable, divisible, and you could standardize them in a way you never could with a cow or a shell.
Standardization, that's the key, right? It makes everything fair.
Exactly. And, our sources say those early coins, they often had pictures of the goods they represented, like a cow or a sheaf of wheat.
Oh, that's cool. So it was like a transition, right? From the actual thing to a symbol of the thing.
Exactly.
But when did they start looking like, the coins we use today with the faces and the, what do you call them?
You mean the engravings?
Yeah, the engravings.
Well, that seems to have started in Lydia. They are the ones who figured out how to standardize coins. with specific weights and values.
No more arguing over whether your cow coin is worth more than mine.
Exactly.
Smart cookies, those Lydians.
They were. And they used precious metals too, silver, gold. So now these coins, they didn't just represent a certain weight or shape. They represented something rare, something with inherent value.
Right, because a gold coin is always going to be worth something, even if it's like 1,000 years old.
Exactly.
Okay, this has been awesome. But we got to talk about paper money because, like, whoa, our sources say that started in China, like way back in the ninth century.
It did. Can you
In the
imagine?
ninth century? That just seems so early for paper money.
It was a radical concept.
Yeah,
Imagine trying to convince someone who's used to trading in, like salt or silk, that this piece of paper is just as good as the real thing.
right. They'd probably laugh you out of the marketplace.
Probably. It probably took a while for that trust to build that this piece of paper actually represented real value.
Plus, how do you even make paper money back then? Like, what's stopping anyone from just, I don't know, doodling on a piece of parchment and saying it's money?
Well, that's the thing. They had to develop sophisticated printing techniques to prevent counterfeiting. It was a whole process.
It makes you appreciate how easy we have it today, doesn't it? Just swipe a card or tap your phone. But it's still mind-blowing to think that this little piece of paper, it revolutionized the way we do, well, everything.
It did. It really did.
Yeah.
It's incredible to see how far we've come from those first bartered flints to those bustling global trade routes and now to this. It really makes you wonder what's next, doesn't it?
I know, right? What's the next cowrie shell gonna be? What do you think?
Flying cars powered by bartered moon rocks.
Hey, you never know.
That's the beauty of it, I guess, the story of economics. It's really a story about human ingenuity, and that story, it's still being written.
Exactly. And who knows what fascinating twists and turns are still to come.
I can't wait to find out. Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us as we explore the long and winding road from bartering to bills.